Hey there, Ahar, and today we're going to talk about the new Guardian Druid change to Flashing Claws. So, Flashing Claws, not only does it have a 10% chance to trigger an additional time, but it also stacks one additional time per point. This is a 2-pointer node, and for each point, 10% chance to trigger an additional Thrash, as well as being able to stack the Thrash Bleed one additional time. So, for anybody who's new to Guardian Druid, baseline, Thrash is able to stack the bleed up to 3 times. And if you have Flashing Claws maxed out, it'll be able to stack up to 5 times. Let me just jump straight into game, and I'm going to hover over my Thrash tooltip. As of right now, the bleed damage my Thrash does is 4.163. over 11.3 seconds. Now I'm going to pop up a calculator. Give me a second. So 4163 divided by 11.3 seconds gives me a total of 368 DPS per second. So for the most part, it doesn't sound like a lot. However, when you think about how many pulls you do in M+, you would say on average, you're probably pulling 5 plus targets. So if we multiply this by 5, and this is just with the 1 point in the node, you have an additional 1842 additional DPS just from the bleed alone. This is not taking into account the additional 10% free thrash trigger, as well as the 2% overall damage you will gain from Rend and Tear. So for Rend and Tear, it says each stack of thrash reduces target's damage done to you by 2%, and it increases your damage to them by 2%. So with 2 points in Flashing Claws, you'll be doing 10% increased damage to that target. Each point is 2% from Flashing Claws. So if we take a look at, this is a Halls of Infusion I just did. Right here, we have I did an overall of 75k DPS. And again, we'll just crack out the calculator. That's an additional 1500 on top of, what was it? Did I say 1600, 1800? I forgot. But I think in total it was about 3.5k DPS for that one point. Slightly more again for the additional trigger on the Thrash. So for 1 point, that's not bad, right? That is definitely not too bad. I could see myself taking this in certain dungeons, certain situations. Now, let's go back into the talent calculator for 0.15, and we'll take a look at what you can possibly do. So as of right now, let's ignore the top section and the middle section. Just look at the bottom section. Dropping Twin Moonfire and Galactic Guardian is not something I would recommend, because these two in combination still do a lot of damage. It's probably here. Well, let me just show you again real quick. As you can see from this dungeon, Moonfire was 17.6k of my DPS. I was, however, running Elun's Favored and Fear of Nature, so it'd be about 20% less damage. But still a lot of damage, obviously. Raise will also be a lot of damage, especially on Fort weeks. I don't think you will ever take Raise out on Fort, especially since it also applies Tooth and Claw to all the mobs. I don't think you can ever take out Ursuk's Guidance and Incarn either. or at least for myself, Incarn is my strongest defensive. I base my routes off of Incarn, so taking Incarn out, I would kind of have to change around my routes a bit, play slightly differently, plan out my defensives differently for the dangerous packs, things like that. Either way though, I do know some people like to play the no-Karn build. I do not think the no-Karn build will be viable. It will be viable, but I do not think it will be better than the Incarn build as far as high key pushing goes. Incarn is just a little too valuable in my opinion. Because Incarn right now, you pretty much have it every one. You already had it 1.5 packs previously. Depending on the dungeon right now, you can have Incarn every pack. It really just depends on how many mobs you're able to pull. So for example, Brackenhide, I can have Incarn almost every pack. And again, it's heavily dependent on just how big you pull. So you can adjust your routes to pull roughly like 8 to 10 mobs. If you're able to pull 8 to 10 mobs on a high enough key level, you'll pretty much have Incarn every pull, which is very significant, obviously. Okay, so that leaves us with Flashing Claws, Ursoc's Fury, Rendon's Hair. For me, if I wanted to go a bit more of an offensive route, and it would also kind of be defensive, I could drop Ursoc's Fury and run Flashing Claws as well. Now, with 2 points in Flashing Claws, I now have the original 10% DR, you know, that I used to have with Scintillating Moonlight. But because we dropped Scintillating Moonlight to take Rendon's Hair and Ursoc's Fury, you had 4% less DR. And Ursoc's Fury probably does make up for that 4% DR. Problem is, you currently do not have Rage of the Sleeper. The good thing though is, as far as this season's set of M+ dungeon goes, there aren't too many frequent magic tank busters, and for the dungeons where there are frequent magic tank busters, they're not too tight on time, so you can take it relatively slow with those dungeons and still be okay. By relatively slow, I mean just for those specific packs. And the dungeons I'm specifically referring to are Niltharis, the Wardens, they have a magic tank buster slash. It's only in the very first pull, as well as the end, where you have the Phoenixes leading up into the last boss. And the other dungeon is Halls of Infusion, the Dragon Corridor. And even for the Dragon Corridor, you can Mind Soothe and skip one of the Dragon packs, which does make it pretty easy. I believe you can also skip the Pat, however, you would have to adjust your route accordingly, obviously. But makes it nice. So for the most part, I don't see myself needing Rage of the Sleeper as far as Fort Week goes. And on Tyrant Weeks, we'll have to see. But on Tyrant Weeks, as long as you're invoiced with the healer, you can call for externals. So I think Rage of the Sleeper definitely lost a bit of value as far as this tier went, because I view Rage of the Sleeper as more of a defensive talent. And even then, it got nerfed slightly because Leech got nerfed. So again, you have you pretty much have 2 points to play with. You can go Ursoc's Fury and 1 point in Flashing Claws, or the 1 point in Loon's Favored. I'm not necessarily sure which one I will be doing yet. I can definitely see myself taking a Loon's Favored to have a bit more on some of the rot fights. There's a lot more rotting as far as this tier goes. A lot more dots, things like that. So I can see myself doing a Loon's Favored on certain dungeons like Brackenhide. Lots of diseases. You have massive pulls. You should be able to get a lot of value, a lot of self-sustain from a Loon's Favored in that dungeon. Trying to think of some other dungeons. Not coming to the top of my head at the moment, but that's an option. For the most part, this was a great change to Flashing Claws. especially since in the last video I had mentioned how Flashing Claws was going to be a dead talent for a 2-pointer node. For the most part, I don't think anybody was going to take this. Kind of similar to Scintillating Moonlight as far as M+ goes, but Scintillating Moonlight I can see some people taking in raid for the 10% DR. Now, you know, Flashing Claws, same kind of thing where, you know, you can definitely see people taking this in M+ and in raid for extra DR, especially since it also works well with Ursoc's Fury. Aside from that, I hope to see some more great changes coming to bear. If you guys have any builds, feel free to link them in the description below. I'm sure there are plenty of builds out there, some that I haven't considered yet. And I'll see you guys in the next one.